All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to review Darklight, which is book one of the Darklight series by Bella Forrest. I'm going to start off, as I always do, with just saying that with this book specifically, it's not necessarily marketed towards me. It is a YA fantasy vampire romance novel. So I am probably not the target audience, um, but I read a lot of different things, and I'm going to try to be as fair and unbiased as possible. So let's get started on this. Starting off with positives. Overall, the writing on a prose level, meaning like the sentence structure, dialogue, stuff like that, was actually okay most of the time. I've read a lot of YA fantasy romance novels, and not saying this makes it the best one I've read, but a lot of times there's dialogue moments where I'm just like, this is very cringe, and no one would ever say this in real life ever. Um, but a lot of the dialogue and relationships felt really natural to me. And for the first, like, I mean, this is a 12-hour audiobook, so for at least like the first 6 to 8 hours, I would say I was like pleasantly surprised with just how, like, I was like, okay, we'll keep moving, we'll keep going. Um, so I think the other thing that I did like about this book was Lyra and Dorian's uh, interactions felt, I wouldn't say all the time, but most of the time felt genuine. Um, I don't really think that their initial meeting felt very forced. Kind of like, you know, why is this happening? Really? Like, I mean, it's kind of explained plot wise, but it's, if you really like think about it a little deeper, it's like, why specifically is this happening the way it is? Um, but most of the time, it didn't feel like it. I didn't have these moments of like, wow, these two characters don't actually have a relationship, but the writer is trying to force a relationship between the two of them. So yeah, that's sometimes, for a lot of writers, that's not the easiest thing to pull off. I've seen plenty of characters who I like put into relationships with people that I just don't feel like it makes any sense. And sometimes that can be personal taste too. So, um, okay. I'm gonna try to keep this non-spoilery as possible, and then I'll go into a few specifics at the end. So, the biggest thing that I would say this book lacks is stakes. Um, Stakes meaning like not conflict. Conflict is very straightforward, pitting two sides against each other, whether that's internal or external. Stakes more referring to like the character has something to actually lose from the conflict, and stakes drive tension. This book does not have that. Almost, actually, I would say it doesn't have it at all. Like, I'm sorry, but this book does not have almost any tension in it. Almost every conflict goes according to plan, with no variations, no deviations, not a whole lot of, you know, nothing really goes bad. Realistically, everything kind of works out most of the time for the best. There is an exception, but I'll talk about that more in spoiler-esque territory. Um, I'll go into that in spoilers too. So, last non-spoiler thing. Nothing in this book is really fully explained, and I see that as a problem of just either beginning writers or not good writers. Um, World building's incredibly important for a fantasy book because you're essentially, even if you're taking, which this book does, it puts this world, this fantasy world, into the real United States of America. We're dealing with real locations that people could go visit. But even with that, you still need to do a level of detailed world building to where you can answer questions that you might not actually put into the book. Because your characters would have that background knowledge, and so you need to have that background knowledge. You can't just do the thing of, this is what happens a lot, and I've seen this in a ton of different books, especially in YA, which is a situation comes up that a character wants to know answers, and we, the reader, wants to know answers to a situation. They start talking and give a few details about the situation, but don't fully explain it. Something interrupts that conversation, whether that be another conflict or the characters just being like, I have to go do something else. But something interrupts the conversation and stops it from being fully explained. This book is very bad about that. And it makes it feel, which I would go out on a limb and bet that the writer does not actually know all of this background. And it's also, I feel like it tends to be something that when you write a first draft, there are plenty of times where you haven't thought through literally everything, because sometimes stories take you in different directions than you think they're going to. But what happens in those drafts, and this happened especially when I was starting writing, you wouldn't answer a question, like your characters would be led to this tense moment, and then you would pass it off because you didn't want to deal with it now. You'll deal with it later. But you kind of need to deal with it now, or at least give enough to the reader to want to find out the answer to that, and then actually answer it later, instead of just not ever bringing it up again, which is what happens in this book. It never gets brought up again. And a lot of it is with the world building, and it makes it kind of hard to follow. Or not, I wouldn't say hard to follow, but it doesn't make it interesting to follow. Just going off of, I'll do the recommendation. I'm not going to probably, maybe at some point I'll read the other two books in this series, but I don't really recommend this series. The other two YA fantasy romances that I would say that I've read would be the entire Ember in the Ashes, which I've done a review on the channel, so if you haven't seen that, you can go check that out, and Throne of Glass. And I did critique Ember in the Ashes quite a bit, the whole series. It's significantly better than this book. There's a lot more tension built in that book than I feel like there's almost zero in this book. I just think that is just a general better book. Okay, let's go into just a couple spoiler things. So if you don't want any spoilers for this book, you do want to go read it, go do that now. Stop the video. I'm going to go into a couple spoilers. So I'm going to start off with the beginning thing, which I skipped over earlier, which is at the beginning of the novel, humans think vampires are extinct. And this is one of the world building things that I have an issue with, which is totally okay with me. Okay, we set the normalcy. But they and there's like a deep, distrust history between humans and vampires prior to them just kind of disappearing. There's basically like no questioning of Lyra is like just literally telling them that she was caught by a vampire. There's like almost no like skepticism about it at all. It's just like, oh wow, they're back, and then like the relationships are like melded immediately. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of like random soldier one throwing fists at, you know, vampire C, but it's never like the main characters never have any tension really between them in ways of like, you know, like these are two historically, you know, antagonist forces to each other. There should be significant amount of mistrust, and there is almost none. And like it's kind of bad. The other thing I was going to talk about with lack of stakes, this is something that really, like, the conclusion is kind of what I expected it to be, and I was actually really hoping that there'd be some kind of twist on it and some tension and difficult choices in there, because I thought that could have actually saved this book, but there was not. Like, the government betrays the main character and is going to execute the vampires, and okay, I expected that, but there's no like confrontation with her uncle, who's one of the higher ends and kind of in charge, like one of the big end in charge guys. No conflict with him directly. There's like he overhears him talking, but there's no like direct confrontation, which would have been interesting. And then there's one specific moment that I remember, which is sorry about that. Which is that you know, the vampires basically being escorted to essentially to be executed, but they don't know that. And sorry, I gotta grab some water quick. Oh man, I apologize about that. So these soldiers are like totally down to execute these vampires, right? Which is like, okay, whatever. They're random, or again, random soldier one. And so Lyra and her team gets into a fight with the vampires against the random soldiers. And there's a moment, which Lyra is a military woman. So while she hasn't killed anyone, and it could be a difficult decision for her to make, especially since they're kind of technically comrades in a way, there's a moment where Dorian is basically going to be shot, I think, and she takes a moment to pause and think, can I kill this person? And instead of killing that person or doing any of that, she just shoots him in the leg and he's totally fine, and Dorian escapes. But that is the problem right there. That character choice would have been so interesting. To have that moment of, can I shoot someone who was my comrade and kill them to protect this vampire who I like? And that choice is taken away from her. I just think it was a really missed opportunity. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video. So if you guys have any comments, any questions, concerns, other opinions about this book, go ahead, post them in the comments down below. I'm interested to know what some other people think. Liking these videos, guys, and subscribing always helps the channel, and I really appreciate it. We have been moving up in subscriber counts, so I'm kind of excited about that. And I hope you guys enjoy these videos, and I will see you next time.